Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. This is your host, Howard Fox. The Outdoor Adventure Series celebrates individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration of the great outdoors. Our guest today is Kelsey Roseth. Kelsey is an entrepreneur. She runs Kero Creative, an advertising marketing agency, and she's also a freelance journalist. Now, as a woman with a disability, Kelsey writes about birding, which is a disability-friendly activity, nature, and the outdoors, and how to pursue outdoor recreation as a person with a disability or a person experiencing chronic pain. Kelsey, welcome to the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast.
Howard, thank you so much. Thank you for the warm introduction and for having me. And hello, everyone out there.
Very good. Very good. You know, I'm a little intimidated by you, Kelsey, because you are a former journalist, and I was watching some of your videos. I think you have your video reel, and I was watching you milk a goat or something, and I'm thinking, I don't know how I can compete with that.
It's true. That is one of the all-time most exciting opportunities I've ever had, I think, as it relates to journalism, just because, like, when would I ever have learned to milk a goat otherwise, right? So yeah, that was honestly such a fun story. And especially in news, they're always looking, well, in TV news, they're always looking for reporters to do something, an activity with their hands while they're on camera for a second. And so literally the story was about milking goats that day. And so it was a perfect fit. So it was a good memory. And of course, I still get teased about it to this day, like right now.
Like I just did. All right. I feel good about this now. Well, listen, I really want to chat about your writing and the freelance work, especially the outdoor activity. And we had Bridget Butler on the show, who I met at the OWAA annual conference. It's how I met you. So I was like, this is sweet. I get all the like great folks I met on the podcast. And so it's a win-win for me, at least for me. And she's very much into the birding, and I love the way she spoke about just slowing down, being in the moment, and really hoping to kind of talk more about your approach to birding, and especially, you know, for someone with a disability, and how your lessons learned and how you're writing and really approaching that topic. But before we get into that, I'd love if you could share just a little bit about your background as a journalist and as an entrepreneur as well, in your own agency.
Yeah, absolutely. And great question. I'll try to make this as quick as possible so we can kind of get to the meat of what else we're chatting about today. So I started my career almost 15 years ago now as a TV news journalist. So as you saw, I was doing a lot of TV reporting and then anchoring on the weekends. And so I really fell in love with the writing process that way because I found it was a really great way to be a storyteller and do it effectively using a visual medium as well to complement the writing. And so I really fell in love with that process and really enjoyed the journalism aspect as well. And so flash forward a couple of years after that, I met my partner, who is now my husband, and we decided that we wanted to move to a more natural, outdoors friendly kind of place rather than Fargo, North Dakota. Now, Fargo has some opportunities for that, don't get me wrong, but where I'm living over in Duluth, Minnesota right now is still close enough to home, but far enough away where the nature and the landscape is just markedly different. And so as we came over here, I was debating what I was going to do with myself, if I was going to go back into the TV news market in a smaller market and kind of all of the challenges that comes with it, or if I wanted to transition to a different form of journalism. So after working a little bit in the corporate world and corporate communications and then doing freelance journalism on the side, back in 2017, I was facing somewhat of a disability situation based on my second spine surgery that was going to be done. And so with that, I didn't want to put my employers, who were fantastic and really supportive of my back injury, but I didn't want to put them in a tough position because small businesses, you lose one person for months and, you know, that's terribly traumatic on a small business. And so I quit my job, had my surgery, and then I was like, all right, where do I go from here? And recovery, still considering how long it takes and how intimate of a process that is, really, I decided, okay, I'm going to try the freelance full-time or freelance journalism full-time job, you know, as a career for me. And so started out with, you know, one occasional client here and there, one small, you know, journalism piece for local papers. And I had only a couple months worth of savings to be able to actually grow the business in that time. And so luckily, right about then, I had the Outdoor Writers Association America conference that was here in Duluth. At the time, I was like, I'm not an outdoor writer. Why would I go to this? And I had a really great friend who was like, you have to go. This organization has changed my life and it'll probably change yours. So I went, realized I had enough work opportunities from that conference alone to actually completely, sustain my quality of life based on that freelance work. And so I was like, yes, this is it. This is the path for me. And so following that surgery, a little bit of recovery later, then it was freelance journalism full time and haven't looked back since.
Fantastic. Now I'm curious, and I am not a writer. I'm a coach, and I'm used to talking to people, asking questions, conversations, and writing for me was very hard. And I'm curious, going into the journalism profession, does that and writing go hand in hand, or are they two separate, threads? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Because honestly, before I went into journalism, I was just, a writer by hobby and practice. And so when I transitioned over to journalism, kind of the biggest differences for me were that story structure. And I'm sure a lot of people get it if they're writing fiction or nonfiction work as part of maybe some advanced training that they went through. I just never really knew how to put a good story together. And so when I went to college for broadcast journalism, that changed everything of how I start a story, how, especially when you're dealing with TV news, you get like maybe a minute and a half max to communicate your message. I mean, most of the time it's less than 30. And so that was such an amazing practice. And I wish everyone could go through it of choosing your words carefully when you're writing and making sure that they make the most impact as possible and that's not wasted. It's far easier for me to do on print than it is in conversation, as you can tell now, because obviously conversations take a little bit more of a meandering path. So journalism taught me how to be succinct in my writing.
Okay, so I'm the meandering path wanderer, and you're the like, okay, Howard, get to the point. Okay.
No, I speak that way too. It's hard to be that direct when you're communicating, I think, as as human beings to each other. But when you're going to write them down and truly, write into a Word document or a journal or whatever it is, that's a good chance to, have your mind think faster than your hand can actually write. And so then you actually get, the quality work that way. So
I love it. I love it. Now, joining the OWAA and the outdoor genre, and I am only a 1 year member of OWAA. It was introduced to me by one of the publicists that I work with that sends me book authors. And she said, when I moved out to Las Vegas, I wanted to get out to the desert, go hiking, look for birds, wildlife. And it was just a wonderful place to go and meet some great people. How did you go into this organization and begin to carve out a space for yourself as an outdoor writer?
yeah. So, certainly as I mentioned, the only outdoor writing that I had done prior to that was just reporting of like such and such received this grant. And it really, very basic stuff. And so this was all new to me. And I remember walking into that conference, I was so intimidated by all of the great outdoor experience that everyone had had. And for me, I had that pre-injury, a long time ago at this point, but, I never could be like as fit and athletic as kind of some of the people I was with. And so I was intimidated by that process. And that's why I walked into the conference. But it was really clear from the get-go that this was a committee that supported each other and really did a lot of like lifting each other up. And so I was assigned a very informal mentor the first day, and she was incredible at saying, oh, you want to write? You need to make money off it? She's like raising her hand. Oh, go speak to this person, this person, this person. And she starts queuing everybody up for me and made those connections for me in that conference. And I think that, yes, what I received via my connection with her was super fortunate and lucky, and I'm grateful for that. I do think that people often underestimate professional organizations and the value that they can provide. And especially nowadays, as a board member at OWAA, so I've since transitioned into that since joining the organization, I think, there's a very small amount of people who really try to flesh out professional memberships and take advantage of every possible thing, whether it's gear discounts or travel discounts or, connections, things like that. And so I would recommend if anyone is interested in that area to just flesh out a couple organizations. Honestly, these are nonprofits. Usually executive directors are very excited to talk to new potential members or, other individuals as well. And so just asking those questions of the ways to make the most out of your membership and not just like electronically fill out the form and then never do anything with it after that would be the best way to go, because I don't think that anything that I did during that conference was like special or unique, et cetera. It was just, I was in a supportive community and I asked questions. And really, I think that anyone can achieve that no matter their experience, because clearly I had none. in outdoor writing. I was a writer, but not an actual outdoors writer. And so that really transformed everything.
And how did this transformation into your interest, how did that start to take shape? Because you have this disability, which, and for our listeners, and quite frankly, if you were to say how would describe a person with disability, I would start to say, loss of limb, blindness, hearing, other things that are visibly obvious to a certain extent. How do you begin to navigate this disability that you really can't see or know about? I can only imagine you go into the shopping center at the local Walmart or Target, you park in the handicap spot, which I have no doubt you have the ability to do that. And somebody makes a snide remark like, why are you parking in a handicap spot? So I can only imagine you having to go through that. However, how did you begin to carve out this interest in like birding or helping others with a disability to navigate this outdoor recreation because they need it as much as I do?
Sure. No, and that's a great question. So this was about 12 years ago when I injured my back the first time. And just for a short summary, I've had three spine surgeries kind of consecutively after that and still live with a chronic pain condition and some degeneration in my spine based on that initial injury, excuse me. And so once that happened, I was 23 at the time. So that kind of gives you an idea. I'm still a very young entrepreneur in that way. I'm 34 today. But I was really surprised by how, like, all of a sudden, in the matter of just a small, simple little injury, my life just changed and it changed forever. And I went through a lot of trauma and grief initially of just like, here is my partner who, George, my husband, is like an ultra marathoner and, ultra runner and hiker. And, he just does all these really active things. And so I started to notice the people around me, like him, like my friends, they were all out still skiing and hiking and camping and doing all these things. Whereas for me, it was hard for me to even get through an 8-hour workday because I couldn't sit in the chair that long. And so I started from a place of trauma. And so I certainly want people to know if they are going through something like this. I mean, it's only through that you start to grow, right? So once I experienced all that initial trauma and like tried, the health appointments to get back on track. And finally, I think year like 5, it really hit me that, oh, wait, I don't think this is going to get better. And I do my best with like self-care activities and things like that. But based on all of the surgeries and everything, we're kind of under the assumption that it wasn't getting better. And I think that when people receive a disability kind of finding later in life or, and they don't have that from birth, it can be really hard for people around them to kind of watch this process because you see this person who is still, energetic and happy and maybe that's not how they are all the time, but maybe how they share that way with employers, et cetera. But it's really hard for people to be like, wait a minute, how come you XYZ, but you're disabled? And so that's kind of, I think, what you were referring to is like how it like would know, right? Because we're, as people with disabilities, we are, expected that if we don't have a very visible physical disability that it's just not good enough, unfortunately. I think that's kind of the way this climate is today. And things are getting better year after year. But still, I mean, even going into the job market when I first moved over here to Duluth was really challenging because if you say, I'm, really hurting today, blah, 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 and they look at you and go, oh, well, you did all your meetings just fine and you're, working harder than, maybe we've seen some people in this position in the past. It's really hard for people to identify that if they can't see it. So anyway, so as part of this whole kind of career trauma with that, and then the trauma with my friends, I realized I was spending a lot of time laying down on the couch while everyone went out and had fun and did social activities. And so I would remember looking out the window and being really sad. And sorry, I don't mean to be depressing, but I was noticed the birds. And they were one thing that like, even when I was bored of watching TV or Netflix or whatever, I could look out the window and see the birds doing their little fluffing feathers thing and kind of preening. And it was a little source of excitement. So I actually started my outdoors journey by literally like lying on my couch out my front window, watching the chickadees, which is usually what we have around here because it's cold a lot. And so it's mostly chickadees. It's not like we have like an amazing variety like you probably do down there. So that's really how I started, was in a place of, kind of that sadness and trauma, but then started to realize like, oh, wait, like this birding is actually way more fun than even my grandparents had let on, because usually that's the demographic I think people expect when they hear about birding. And so I just realized that was a really light and easy way to experience the outdoors without having to do all the physical activity, but you could still grow and experience the activity without it being physically challenging.
I love the story of you laying on the couch and looking out the window and seeing the birds. Because one of the things I learned from Bridget Butler is that if you want to get into the birding, just go outside. So you've covered that. You're looking out the window. And then she said, buy a bird feeder.
Mhm.
Do you have a bird feeder?
I do. I have so many of them now. It's embarrassing for someone my age, I
Okay,
think.
so
I have,
this is
yeah,
the opportunistic. You're going to tell me this, so I'm going to interrupt you, but because I get to do that, it's my show. I'm a very opportunistic podcaster, and all my listeners know that, and especially around the outdoor spaces. I would love a picture of all the bird feeders outside
sure.
for our show notes, and if you're in it, even better. Your husband in it, even better. I just think that is so cool. Is that you just get to sit in on your chair, lay down, look outside. There's the bird feeders and all these wonderful birds coming by for lunch and dinner.
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, that's how it started out. And honestly, it's still to this day. I mean, over the years, I've added more feeders and learned some recipes for keeping squirrels off, which are amazing. So we can talk about those if you need at some
Oh,
point.
those squirrels!
Um,
I've seen enough YouTube videos. They're unbelievable.
they are, they are. Now I have hot pepper that keeps them away that birds can't taste. So anywho, so yeah, even when I started to get better at birding, when I kind of honed my skills, I could recognize the birds, playing around with the different apps that are available and online resources. It still was really challenging because, again, the quote unquote, and I say quote unquote because I don't believe this, but I think this is the industry belief that the real birders, quote unquote, are the ones who are out, standing in the same spot for hours and hours, getting that perfect shot, and they can hear a single chirp and they know what bird it is. And that was so hard as a new birder because this is something I wanted to learn as my hobby. But as anyone who's had chronic pain or any medical condition knows, medications cloud your memory. So it's really hard to remember all those things and all those aspects of all the birds. And then also I couldn't sit out, like it's snowing right now. I'm not going to sit out in the snow and go look at birds. Like I will be warm and comfortable. But for me, it was more of I simply couldn't pursue it at the intensity which is recommended for birding. But honestly, I think that was kind of a blessing in disguise because it made me really see how truly simple you can break activities, how simple chunks you can break them into to still find joy in it without having to go overboard for your
Sure,
body and for yourself.
sure. Now, what are some of your favorite birds when they come by for a visit besides the chickadees?
Yeah, the chickadees are nice because they're always around. I love the look of blue jays, but man, they are bullies. They are so mean to those chickadees. So I don't know. I have a love-hate relationship with them. We have cedar waxwings up here, and I have these small, like true vaulted windows that are right outside of my office. And there's a bush with some berries. And so every once in a while, if I look up at the right time in the, you know, right spot in winter, there's a bunch of them sitting up there and eating the berries, and then they're gone, and I never see them again. So personally, I like being happenstance and like falling onto those opportunities because again, with my pain and stuff, I can't plan out like, oh, here are the best days to catch this bird at my feeder. So it's mostly just whatever I see. And when I see the cedar waxwings, now that is a good day.
Very good, very good. As you have been writing, especially the birding, and I would agree, it's a very disability friendly activity. So, in the comfort of your home, your backyard, what advice would you give to another who perhaps has been on a maybe not the same, but a similar journey? And as a really perhaps a testimonial that, yes, things are what they are, but you don't have to let it get the best of you. You can go and have a vibrant life and enjoy, the simple things like birding. What kind of advice would you give to somebody that's now experiencing what you've had experienced?
So I think one of the biggest challenges for me kind of over time is just stepping back from that idea of what's perfect and focusing on things that are actually achievable. And so for me with birding, I can't do it perfectly as we've identified because of my physical barriers, but I can still enjoy it. And so I make a little bit of a game out of the other aspects of birding that not a lot of people enjoy, purely to kind of fill some of those gaps. So for example, I'm trying to there's ways you can like grow your own mealworms, or for me like figuring out that one like seed mix where the squirrels weren't going to come, and like getting little joys of like yes when they go off that feeder. Little moments like that were really rewarding for me. And to someone like my husband, he doesn't care, what he's like, I don't know, I just walk them off and not eating all of our food. But for someone who with physical limitations, that kind of opens up another layer of reward and you kind of create that space for yourself. Same thing with camping. My husband and I go camping all the time. And is it the perfect camping that he would love to do? Absolutely not. He's a backpacker. He likes the more rich, like completely solo outdoors experience. And I can't do that because I need to come with accommodations and whatnot. But even for me, we'll go camping and we've kind of identified some gear that can help make it as comfortable as possible. But then I've transformed my activities. So when I'm at the campsite, it is, they're very like small kind of, book-based activity books that I can bring just to simply sit in the quiet and do those things, or just read that book that mentally I'm too exhausted or stressed by the end of the day to read. So things like that, which aren't, necessarily camping, they're aspects of camping, but that kind of becomes my whole experience then, or just these little sidebars that I can actually make into the experience. Even like when we travel, again, George will want to go and do all these really adventurous things. So I've learned to study history. I'm not good at it by any means, but it's fun, at least for, investing myself in, okay, well, here I am and here's a historical cemetery. Let's go take a look. And I can walk around in putts and do that easily without hurting myself. So a lot of it a lot of it comes down to finding joy in those little moments that you don't see when you're looking for that perfect experience. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I appreciate that. Do you incorporate any of aspects of photography into your bird watching, or are you just for the most part just writing about stories about these kinds of activities?
Yeah. So when it comes to photography, often I can't lift the cameras
Okay.
with my weight lifting limit. And so I do
Okay.
have, a small Canon 80D that can take photos for publishing. I've had them published before and it's even an older camera. So it does a good job, even in case anyone needs one. But for me, the lenses are too heavy to carry around. If I can just have just the camera with one lens on it, it's going to be too heavy for me. So most of the
Okay.
time it's just the writing piece.
Okay. So tell us about some of the articles, especially now you have an article on birds and blooms. Tell us about some of that writing. What are they are looking for, and how have you been able to, craft your pieces to meet what their request was?
Yeah, and so Birds and Blooms has actually been one of my favorite brands to work with, and then favorite writing assignments that I've had throughout the course of my career. Again, when it comes down to the writing of things, if I couldn't go out on these huge birding expeditions to write about them, and I was getting assigned these pieces on how to keep squirrels off your feeder, or what to feed, chickadees or whatnot. Playing with the words became kind of my game, if we're talking about breaking things into fun little bit of chunks, playing with the words. And so Birds and Blooms loves alliterations. So anything you could say like the fun feathered friend, that sort of message. So really for me, writing about those more kind of basic activities around birding became an artistic endeavor because I was able to play with my writing. So that's something that I really enjoyed over the years for them. And so most of my work for them specifically is related to just the bird species. They're often in the feeder talk column, which just talks literally about how to, get these birds to your feeders in your backyard. And also that's a little chance for me too. I mean, as I'm doing the research to find more ways to kind of expand my passion and interest for the hobby. But I think by far one of the coolest things is that when I write about something like this and it gets shared to one of the groups that either Birds and Blooms manages personally, or honestly, sometimes people will just email me and they'll say like, oh, well, I've been looking for ways to do this with my grandkid. And, knowing that, someone your age is interested in, this portion of it. Like, for example, there's like a Merlin, there's an app that you can use to play around with. And, they'll kind of learn these little ways to bring birders into their life more. And like that is so, or to help birders kind of happen earlier in life, I guess is what I should say. And so I've really enjoyed that over the course of working with them, is just seeing kind of that connection from like your very first, why would I bird? I'm not a bird person, all the way to people who've been doing this their whole life and have way more knowledge than me. Right. So it's been a fun pursuit that way.
Fantastic. Well, and it's nice to get acknowledgement or questions asked from people who have read or come across your columns and your work. Heck, I mean, I was impressed that you were milking a goat. So I mean, I don't know if I was going to do that. How about the community of individuals with disability? What has there been any reaction from them about, clearly you have a love of the outdoors. You have developed this love of birding and found ways to not only, feed your interest, but to make it interesting for you. What kind of reaction have you gotten from the the community of folks with a disability?
Yeah. So one of the things I think that's most important for people to remember if they're kind of coming new into their, disability journey and what that looks like is that all of my, writing or research or anything that I did in that space came from, obviously like a bad starting place. And so I think it's easy for people to, see from the outside and be like, oh, well, there's this person with chronic pain and they're writing about it and they're stretching every day and they're doing their, self like massage techniques, things like that to try to relieve some of that stress. Oh gosh, how would I even get there? And what I've learned throughout this writing process is that, I mean, for me it was an outlet initially. I just needed to get that thought out of my mind and put it on paper. And so I was writing for me more than anything else at the start. And there was a time when I transitioned into a chronic pain blog just because I wanted further, connection between me and having some responsibility there to, tie back to my chronic pain self-care routine that I was supposed to be doing and still am supposed to be doing to this day. And so that's where it started from. But then as that community opened up and I started getting people commenting, on the blogs or, even just connecting with other people that I told, yes, I have, this disability, which before I wasn't really publicly sharing it. I was a little embarrassed, honestly, which no one should be, but that's, I think, society. So once I started to really listen, I realized how vastly, insanely different each person's physical uniqueness is. And obviously, like we know that as human beings, but once you start to look at the little intricacies of having a disability, I mean, gosh, if I just had to describe it to someone, I could do a 3-hour speech of just here's what this feels like versus this. And so as I opened up my writing to that and started, requesting feedback from people, I realized how many people are in similar places who wouldn't consider themselves disabled because they feel like they shouldn't, or they feel like they're not disabled enough, quote unquote. And I know some of it is, a disability within like the federal, you have your security, social security, things like that. But I think there are a lot of people who are working with a disability, plenty of people who are doing this and either suffering in silence or, just trying to manage through it as best they can and hold it together. And so for me, it was really, gosh, it was so great to see, oh, wow, there are so many people. Not only are there a ton of people who experience this, but we're all very different in the ways in which we're disabled. However, all of our concerns are still the same. Like we want to do our best at treatment. Things get hard when you're stressed and if you don't have support at home. And there is, honestly, it's just been like a really kind of magical journey for me to see how many ways we are different, how many ways we are connected at the same time. Sorry, kind of long answer to your short question there, but did that get to kind of what the heart of what you were looking
Oh,
for?
I think it's good because I think everybody is on a different journey. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of overlap, but it's like this massive Venn diagram. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a very little piece where there's an overlap, and what's not overlapped is your journey. It's your uniqueness, and I appreciate that. And I think hopefully our listeners will appreciate that as well. I mean, if somebody listens to this podcast and says, I want to take up birding, I want to go walk out into the urban area. Maybe it's not going hiking in the mountains, but maybe there's a park I can go walk to or drive to and just sit on a bench and just observe. That could be just good enough. And I think that's what I would hope for making a difference in this work. If you were to leave our listeners with, an insight to go, and we call it insight to go because it was a part of our Success Insight podcast, which was the original podcast and then we spun off Outdoor Adventure. But this insight to go was designed for a final quote, an inspiration, a book, something that really resonates for you that you would want to share with our audience about the journey you have been on. Kelsey, what would your insight to go be?
My insight to go would be purely to give people the recommendation to take literally every moment at a time, which I think sounds so cheesy and oversaid. I've noticed for me, whether it is related to my physical health, my mental health, my career, if I actually started opening all the doors to all those things that I'm wildly stressed out about in various aspects of, my life as they come and as things change throughout the year, it'd be overwhelming. It would be completely unmanageable. I mean, right now, even thinking of, I have another surgery that I'll have to get for my spine in the near future. Now, if I truly were to open myself up to like, oh gosh, another surgery, what does that mean? Oh, wait, what is that? And I start to kind of think of all like the snowball rolling down the hill. You just lose control and you lose control so fast. And it's almost a terrifying experience. And so for me, as I've learned with either my physical limitations, I try to take every moment. So if I'm already disappointed in myself that I couldn't get, XYZ done, I have like these certain chores that I had throughout the day, even if it's something as small as going on a, 5-minute walk or just doing a couple of light stretches, that I try to just do whatever I can in the moment. And then when I'm done with that, I will focus on the next task. And knowing that as long as I've done a couple of those things to feel those little peaks of success, that the rest of the time is manageable. And so I do that in my work as well. I have a growing business right now, and new staff members are coming on, et cetera. And so obviously, like, that keeps getting more and more, adds more and more pressure to my plate. And so rather than trying to look at this growing organism that I somehow created, but it feels, like a separate thing because it's bigger enough at this point where it's not just me anymore. It can be overwhelming and scary. And when you're in pain, you do not need fear, because that stuff manifests physically and you start to feel more pain. And so for me, if I just break everything down to focusing on the little moments that you can either get some relaxation from them or make some progress toward your goals, that's fine. And then that way, if I need to lay down, so like tonight after work, I'll definitely be laying down for a large portion of time, may or may not feel good enough, quote unquote, to read. It might just be Netflix. And then with that, it gives me a little bit of grace, because I'm like, okay, well, I focused on all these moments throughout the day. Kelsey, don't feel bad if you're spending the next 2 hours or the last 2 hours of today watching Netflix. It's okay. And so it kind of gives me some internal grace to be able to do some of the things that I feel guilty about, because again, that's a problem with people who are facing disability or are disabled, is that like you need to be productive and to be that perfect human being that's on top of work and relationships and personal stuff. But we can't all be that all at one time. And so focusing on each moment helps. At least it does for me.
Fantastic. We appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. Kelsey, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
So I'm on virtually every social media platform as Kelsey Roseth, except for Instagram. You can search my name, but it's kelsey.ro. I had accidentally created another account with my name and now I can't access it. So it's embarrassing. But anywho, so any social media platform with my name. Otherwise, I have a website as well. It's kelseyroseth.com. And that'll give you some connection to some of the work that I've done if anyone's interested, or honestly, just a chance to get in touch with me. I welcome messages from anyone, even if it's something of like, oh, I heard too. This is cool to hear. Even something as small as that kind of makes my day. So I'm always open to that sort of communication.
Fantastic. Well, we will provide the backlinks to your website as well as to your social site. And we have, the links to the articles that you've shared with us, and we'll have those on the website as well. And really just excited to introduce you to our audience and in the outdoor space. I mean, as I was introduced to it coming out here to Las Vegas, it has evolved and it's continuing to evolve. And I really appreciate now being introduced to this aspect of, I can appreciate the outdoors, the adventure that I can have, especially as someone with a disability. And so truly appreciate your openness to share a part of your journey, and hopefully it has a positive effect, if not on an individual, somebody who knows somebody. And that's how it snowballs in that respect. So Kelsey, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know you've got a lot going on as a business owner and entrepreneur, and then some. I know your plate is full, and so I do appreciate you taking the time to join us on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast and sharing your story with our audience.
Thank you so much, Howard. Again, thank you for having me. And to all those that are listening out there, thank you so much for listening to my story a little bit. And if there's ever anything I can do, please let me know. You know how to reach me now. So
Fantastic. Well, hang on the line for just a minute. We're going to do a quick close, and you and I can have a final chat. All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Kelsey Roseth. She is an entrepreneur. She runs Kero Creative, an advertising and marketing agency. She is an accomplished freelance journalist, and her focus has been on birding, and really from the perspective of as a woman with disability, really kind of carving out a niche for herself, not only to create interest and keep her creative and on top of her game. Just imagine just looking out the window and seeing all these wonderful birds. And I'm excited. This is actually our third episode where we have touched on birding. I'm going to have my VA add a new category. So we'll confirm that this week when we produce the episode. So There's always something new to do when you have a website. Oh my God. But listen, what a great topic. And really, I mean, the message that the undercurrent here is that no matter where you are, what you're doing, what is you are affected by, there's an opportunity to really create some, value for yourself and interest and creativity. And you don't have to be curtailed by something perhaps like a disability, and there is opportunity galore. Just look out the window, walk outside the door, whatever works for you. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. You'll find us on the Outdoor Adventure Series website, and we can also be found on the major podcasting platforms: Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Audible. There's a couple others I'm missing. Oh, yes, of course, Spotify, where we have the Outdoor Adventure Series playlist. And on any of those platforms, please let us know what you thought of today's episode. If you have comments for myself or for Kelsey about the topic, we want to hear from you. And also, please share this episode with your family and friends as well. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. And we look forward to having you join us for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Take care now.